Are you insane?
那个能有什么不同的？
どこの会社？聞いたことないな。
Ну как хочешь.
In 2002, nobody knew the name Vatech. But now, we are the leading producer of dental imaging devices in the world. As a world-renowned expert in dental imaging technology, we are the trusted partner for clinicians in over 100 countries. What's their next innovation? The dental community is now waiting for Vatech's next technological developments. We started by asking one question: what technology could make your life better? Our goal was not to beat the competition, but to serve your needs and keep your patients safe. This led us to dedicating ourselves to the total production of dental imaging solutions. We are the only manufacturer that designs and produces all essential parts of the dental imaging system, including software. Our dedication to improving lives through technology led us to innovations the world has never seen. The world's safest CBCT, the Smart CT, which captures 2D and 3D images simultaneously, flexible and aimless intraoral digital sensors, and the world's lightest intraoral portable X-ray. Distinct in their own ways, but one goal remains: a better life. As a leader in dental imaging, we continue to invest in our product and service development. The confidence in our products led to a commitment for unrivaled service too. Your investment is protected with a first-class 10-year warranty. With Vatech, you can always give your best to your patients. We are your partner and have your best interests at heart. This is our commitment to you. With this commitment, our dental X-ray systems are being installed all around the world. The greatest number of clinicians around the world have chosen Vatech's intraoral sensors. Many doctors are now able to plan less invasive and quicker treatments for their patients. We learn from our partners every day to find out the best solutions for you. Our sales and customer support teams gather your feedback and address your needs. To learn from you, we travel the world each year. On our way to becoming a better partner, we believe that only happy employees can nurture happy customers. That is why we also support healthy lifestyles of both our employees and their families. We promise providing technologies inspired by you, outstanding quality, and the service second to none. With Vatech, you can always give your best to your patients. This is our commitment to you.
Welcome everyone to the Vatech Weekly Webinar Series, April 8th edition. I'm Jim Mayer, Education Team Manager with Vatech America, broadcasting live from my home studio here in St. Louis, Missouri. I have the pleasure of working with Paul Satone, who is also streaming live from Las Vegas.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here. My name is Paul Satone. I'm the West Coast Education Specialist at Vatech. Really excited to be here with you, Jim. Been hunkered down here in Vegas, went out for a walk this morning. Not many people out there, so just trying to enjoy it. And great to be here.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, my wife and I have been very fortunate to have some weather here in St. Louis. We've been taking advantage of it, going outside, doing some barbecuing, just relaxing, kind of trying to do our part to be socially responsible today.
Right, I get it. So I'd like to thank the over 500 people that we have logged in for today's session. So great to have everyone here today.
Yeah, Paul, it's pretty amazing. Our numbers continue to grow for our webinar sessions. I did notice we have many people logged in who attended last week. Thank you for logging back in with us this week. We hope you can follow up with us for our future series on Wednesdays. We'd also like to welcome all of our Vatech clients who we consider family. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe. If you're currently not a Vatech user, we hope to give you a glimpse into the world of Vatech and what we have to offer. For today's session, I hope we can all slow down, kind of focus on bettering ourselves through education. We're all in this together. Today's topics, we're going to cover the 3D-i specific to the sectional tab window. So that's going to be today's session today. Paul, do you want to talk about what we have coming up in our series?
Sure, absolutely. So next week, same time, Wednesday, we'll have implant planning, making it quick and easy. April 22nd, we'll have, we're calling it 5 Clicks to Yes with Dr. Todd Engel, which would be a great session to have him with us. And then April 29th, we'll be talking about anatomy and the different fields of view. And May 6th, we still have yet to be determined our topic. So again, any feedback from anybody listening would be really valuable to us, so we appreciate that. And there's a couple different ways that you can give us that feedback. We have a couple email addresses. First of all, sales@vatechamerica.com for any feedback would be really appreciated. We also have popped up our education email address. If anybody has any questions regarding the software for our education team, so it will be education@vatechamerica.com. Feel free to email us at that. You can also give us feedback on socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, also great places for feedback and communication in general.
Thanks, Paul. Let's check out what we have coming up here. Looks like we might have a little audio issues here or picture issues. All right. Thanks everyone for your patience here. All right. Paul, thanks for doing that. We had our screen freeze here for a second, but we have our
there we
sales coming up here. Perfect. Everybody's at home doing webinars now and online, so a little bandwidth issues here on my part. Today's session, this is what you should be seeing on screen. What you're going to be looking at over here is your, you can see Paul and myself at the top of the screen. You should see my screen below that. Over here to the right is going to be your GoToWebinar quick tab. So you can click on this to collapse that, kind of your control panel over there. You can ask some questions, and we're going to look at that window here right now. So let's go over here and let's look at our audio. So everyone has two options. You can log in with your phone, or you can do your computer audio. If you're on your computer audio and you're having issues, I would suggest either calling in on your phone, or what you can do is go to your help window right here and troubleshoot your computer issues there. We did talk about this being a question and answer session. So I'd like everybody to kind of look off to the lower right. You can see your question box here. And over to the lower right, you can ask your questions. I have my full education team on standby to be able to look at your questions, respond right away. Some of those questions we are going to be addressing during the webinar, and some we're going to wait till afterwards. After the webinar, we have a Q&A session from 1 to 1:30. If we don't get to your questions during the session, look for them next week. We will also be doing this for continuing different questions. So here's one question we had from last week that we're going to touch on after the session, or at the 1 o'clock time at the top of the hour. How do I identify patient movement? If our scan does not look great, it's going to be really hard to work with. So we're going to touch base on this. So I hope everybody can stick around till after the webinar session at 1 o'clock. We're going to continue to do a quick Q&A session with the questions you have. For today's sessions, our session of what we're going to be covering, the sectional window, we're going to do a scan overview. We're going to look at 2 separate scans. We're going to look at a 12:9 and a 5:5 field of view. We're going to ask ourselves, why are we looking at the sectional window? And we have so many different options. 3 different ways to, I'm going to call it, draw the curve. Clinical applications we're going to look at. We're going to look at implants, extractions, endodontics, and some other clinical topics there. Sectional window defaults. We're going to give you the tools to set your defaults on your sectional window to optimize the view that you want to see. And then also some practices for sharing your findings, be it photos, emails, etc. through there. So Paul, I think we're almost ready to start. One question I would like everybody to ask, throughout this series, ask themselves is, do you have a consistent workflow for your scan? So when you sit down to look at your scans through Vatech software or other third-party softwares, what we're trying to establish is an easy path for you to do your work up your cases. When you get back to the office, we can scroll through our scans. Same thing for each clinical application. So kind of think about that as we go through our session here today. We really appreciate everyone logging in with us. Paul, I think with that said, we might be ready to go ahead and start our session.
Sounds good, Jim.
All right. So let me do this. I brought up my my screen here. This is my Vatech Ez3D-i screen. This is where all of our patients are going to be stored. And we can search for our patients over here in our search box. We can also search for our patients through here, click the search here, do a plus drop down. What I did is I searched for my patients I have planned for today's session, April 8th. You can see here we have our 17:15, which we looked at last week. This week, we're going to look at our 12:9 and then also our 5:5 scan here. So here's our last week's session. We clicked on the large 17:15. Up here, you kind of get some illustrations of what that 17:15 field of view covers. Today, let's go into our 12:9 session. So once I have my patient added, I'm going to come down here. Let's go ahead and double click on this. And what this is going to do, it's going to launch our Ez3D-i software here. So Paul, I've got our Ez3D-i software up on the screen. And let's go through we talked about the scanning overview. What do I want to see when I first open up my scan? So I'm just going to go ahead and I've got my 3D rendering here, and we've chosen the teeth setting. So let's go through here, kind of look around. We have implant site here. Number 19, we have our third molars. Let's rotate this around a little bit more so we can kind of just get an overview of what we're looking at here. We talked about different views. We can change this over to our grayscale to look at a different view there. But let's keep it on our teeth view here. So the first thing I do with my overview is I'm going to right click here and I'm going to go into switch to main view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my sagittal slice and grab this, and let's move this up to the superior border of our scan. I'm also going to hit my space bar here to toggle off what we'll call our crosshairs. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start from the superior border of the scan and start to scroll down. And what I'm doing is I'm identifying any anatomic landmarks. Here's my maxillary sinus, our nasal concha through here, our nasal septum. Let's keep scrolling down here as we go down a little further there. Okay.
So Jim, one question that popped up here, how come we can't see the condyle?
Good question, Paul. So last week we looked at our 17:15 scan. This week we're looking at our 12:9. So I can see the condyle back here, but that 12 centimeters in diameter, it is slightly cutting off that condyle. So if we're not interested in the condyle, we could scan with our 12 by 9. Depending on the device you have, you could scan with a larger scan, maybe we'll say a 16 by 9 or 18 by 10, or we could even get into the field of view of the 17 by 15 would be another option there.
Right. Okay, great.
Cool. So I'm going to keep kind of scrolling down through here. And what we're going to, as we scroll down, we're going to get to our hard palate. We can see our nasopalatine canal here. We can start to see our root tips there and molars. And let's just kind of stop right in here. What I have my doctors do as we're scrolling through this is we're identifying our anatomy. We can see our molars here. I always look for fourth canals on my first molar. So I can see a canal here, here, and we're gonna look at this later on tooth number 3 for a possible MB2 there. So let's progress down. I'm just scrolling inferior as we scan through here. We can start to see our nerve here and here. And note where we are on our blue slice over here, we can see our axial slice is what we're viewing. And for a quick review, we have our right side and our left side. So I'm going to keep scrolling down. Right now we're getting through our bite stick there, and we can see our impacted third molars here. I'm also noticing another nerve here and here. Eventually we're going to get to our mental foramen, but let's go down through there. We can see our implant site. Keep on scrolling down. As I'm doing this, I'm watching with my eye where our nerve is tracing, and eventually we'll hit our mental foramen there. And as we stop right here, we can see we have our mental foramen here and here. And we're pretty close to the inferior border of the scan. We're going to stop here one last time, look at symphysis of our chin. We can see our hyoid bone and our epiglottis right here. After that, I go back up and use my reset NPR. It's going to go ahead and reset my scan, hit my space bar. Another practice I get into with looking at my larger fields of view is going into the coronal view, switching this to the main view. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna come over here. We're gonna grab our yellow coronal slice. Let's move that to the anterior portion of the patient, hit our space bar, and now we're gonna go ahead and scroll anterior, posterior through here. So we can see our nasopalatine canal here. Starting to see the width of the ridge, height of the ridge. Stop right here again. We can see our mental foramen for more of a coronal view. And I can see my yellow slice here and here that we're looking from an AP view there. Start to see our maxillary sinus through there, our nasal concha. As we scroll back, I'm looking at following my nerve all the way into the ramus. We can see our hard palate here. All right, and we should be getting back pretty far. And what I'm doing is I'm looking over here. It looks like we're right at our third molars or right near our third molars. So one thing we're going to look at is we have impacted thirds here. Here's our nerve and here's our nerve. How can we use the sectional slice to look at the relationship of that nerve and our third molar there? Let's keep scrolling back. Here's our hyoid bone down at the bottom of the scan, into the ramus, airway, and now we're getting back into our spine. So that's going to be my overall view. It takes a few seconds to do that. I'm going to come up here and do my reset, and we've basically gone and we had to reset our view, and now we can start on our sectional window. So one of the questions we ask is, why do we use the sectional window? We have our 3D pan tab, we have our NPR where we can just kind of navigate to what we want to see. But let's talk about using our sectional window. So I'm going to right click over here and let's start in our axial slice. And we're going to highlight our draw curve tool, which will take us to our sectional window. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll with the wheel on the mouse down inferior. And I scroll until I can see the width of the ridge here. So when I say width of the ridge, I can see the mandible going all the way across from the buccal side to the lingual, almost all the way around the ridge there. So I'm actually going to drop this down a little further. Then I'm going to come over here to my draw curve, and you'll notice that my cursor has got the little arch there. So that's my draw curve icon. We always want to draw clockwise. I'm going to left click and drag and left click. So note that I'm going right through the center of the ridge and tracing around that. As I trace, you see the green points placed on there. Once I finish that or get to the other side, on the left side here, I'm going to double click. And that's going to take us over to our sectional window. So a little bit about our sectional window here. We do have, grab my highlighter here. We do have our scout, which is going to be our axial slice. Notice our right side and our left side. We can see the points that I placed here all the way around the arch. I can also see that our total length is going to be 186 or almost 187 millimeters. Note down here, my right side and my left side, and all my slices. So right here, slice 0 all the way through 187. This vertical red slice is going to be my red slice over here. Slice number 93 also correlates to my red slice down here. Everything's going to be labeled, our buccal and our lingual. And I'm going to hit escape. And what I can do is I can go ahead and double click here to enlarge our window right here on that. So that's kind of an overview of the 3 windows here. Off to the side, we have curves where we can draw curves 1 through 8. So one of the reasons why I like using my curve tools here is we can catalog almost the cases that you work up. We can catalog each case. So we're going to call this one, we're looking in the mandible. We'll call that number 1. We're going to draw some other ones in the maxilla, maybe through one of our molars there, and we'll progress as we go through there. All right.
So Jim, that reconstructed pan in the lower left panel there, that looks a little bit thin. How can we change that? And can we change it in the settings as well?
Sounds good, Paul. Yeah. So if you notice right here, 0 millimeters or a really thin slice, we're basically seeing the slice this less than a millimeter in this window. So I'm noticing we are missing some anatomy. We're not seeing here in the ramus. We're not seeing our full nerve here, missing root tips through there. So a way to quickly change that is if we go over to our panorama, I can go over here to my thickness, and notice when I change this up to 10 millimeters, to me that looks like a better reconstructed pan, if you will. I can see a nice width of the ridge. So notice my 10 millimeters here. What we're seeing is, here's our 10 millimeters. We're seeing from this green line to here, we're seeing our 10 millimeter, I'm going to call it our focal trough. So we can see everything that falls within that focal trough. Let's look and see if I change this up to 20 millimeters. We have our pan there. So preference is really yours. You have the option to change this over here for any slice thickness. Paul, you asked, on how are we going to change this as a setting? I don't want to have to do this each time that I go through my software for each case to change my thickness. Usually You'll find one setting you like. So let's go up to main menu up here. I'm going to come over here to settings. And let's go over here to view. And finally, my 2D view. So what I did was, for a quick highlight, I went up to main menu. I went to settings. I went to the second tab, view here, 2D view, and then over here to panorama view. Right now it's set for 0 or the thinnest slice. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, drop this down to, we'll default mine for 10 millimeters, and I'm going to click on OK. So if I do go back to my MPR window and redraw that curve, we can now notice, and this time I'll just go ahead and draw all the way across the ridge here. We can now notice that it defaults to my 10 millimeters here, not that 0 millimeter total that we had there. So
right. And I assume we can make that a little bit larger as well, so we can see more of the upper quarters.
Right. So if we want to change the height of this pan, there are some settings in there. Right now it's set for 5 millimeters. Or what I can do is I can come here, 5 centimeters. What we can do is we can come here and change the height. So I can grab this yellow line or this yellow line to change my height. And this is going to be the center. So if I come here, I'm going to hover my mouse here and drag, and it's going to open that window up to create our height here. And let's move our green line to go right to the center. And now we can look and bring this back down a little smaller. And we're going to say that we have a nice recreated pan there.
Right, and we could extract that as a separate pan-out JPEG image as well.
We
Right.
definitely could, yeah. So that's another way to reconstruct your pan out of this image. Note, I am missing some anatomy here. I'm actually going to change this to 20, and I'm going to drag my slices out a little bit, or my sectional. Let's look and see what we can get out of our 12:9 pan as far as a reconstructed pan. So let's change our sectional here to 20. To me, that looks a little better. And then we could come down and go over to our capture tools. Let's go to our second one here. We talked about this last week, capture window. And we're going to click without overlay, and that's going to capture our reconstructed pan there.
Great.
Now, one thing to note is for our reconstructed pan, if you notice over here, we are not quite getting our condyles because we talked about that 12:9 field of view. So it is a little bit smaller than what we looked at last week to get that full reconstructed pan there. Right. I'm going to go ahead and change these back down to our 10 millimeters. And Paul, I'm going to go ahead and double click here. And let's go up to the first curve we drew. So you notice I have two curves now. The first one is focused more on the mandible. Notice I do have the opposing occlusion here. So I'm going to grab with the wheel on my, or grab with the cursor here, and let's drag this over to site number 19. Move this up here, and we can see our slice. So one thing that is really nice about the software, we get a lot of likes for this, is we can rotate this line here, because right now I'm slicing vertically through that implant site. I want to rotate this site. So what I'm going to do is come here. We're going to go ahead and rotate, and I can use the wheel on my mouse and go across here, moving through our slices. So let's move this up a bit, and right now we've kind of have this set up, maybe moving into our first clinical tools of implants there. Paul, do you want to kind of walk us through going through implants here for site number 19?
Sure, definitely. So yeah, so we'll put an implant right on that slice, which is demonstrated on the panorama at that specific angle, which is really nice there. So first, let's go ahead and measure. Let's do a horizontal and a vertical measurement. Up there on the toolbar, we just click on length, and we can do a measurement from the ridge to the nerve there, and then also buccal lingual. So it's a click and a click. We get our measurement, and the tool stays on. So if you want to turn the tool off, you have to do a right click, and the tool will go off. You can also, a common question is that the measuring, the numbers are kind of in the way. And you can always grab them and pull them out of the way to the side of the image. Another tip, I think, if you put the implant in at this point, they tend to get in the way of the measurements. So what I usually will do is hide or delete those measurements. But before we do that, I always take a screenshot just so I have a record of it. So if we go up to the camera, click on the camera, it'll take a screenshot of my screen, saving my measurements. And then if we do a right click on the measurements themselves, you can either delete them or hide them, whichever you choose. And we'll just hide those. And then from there, all we have to do is click on Insert Implant on the left. And the first thing we'll do, we're on single. We'll choose our tooth number first. So we choose our tooth number, and our company is going to be there. So once we click on tooth number 19 on that window, you can see we have Straumann defaulted on our company list. So we'll have Straumann, and we're going to use the bone level tapered. So maybe we'll put maybe a 12 or a 14 length millimeter implant in there. You can see we have the occlusal and apical diameters and the column for length. So we'll go ahead and just choose one of those. And we have our set on axis down there. You may have click point. We have our set on axis. Axis just kind of positions it right on the center of that slice. And click point, there's a separate window that will pop up. So I feel
it. I want to clarify one thing here. We have ours defaulted to Straumann. You can default your own computers as you go through these. So we've just happened to default ours with Straumann through the set as default there. But I didn't mean to cut you in here, but let's go ahead and place our implant here to insert. And you were talking about the access, so I'm going to click on insert.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it would place our implant there.
Yep, and then we can position from there.
Right. So we went over to our Paul. Thank you for taking us through that exercise. We went through our insert implant, changed our angle down here, platform at the green line, and now we have our implant placed. I can come here and I can rotate. I can grab my implant bodily and move that around if I need to through there. If I want to change that implant size, we can go right here to edit implant. Within my Straumann, we can look at a 12. We can change our diameters through here. Next week, we have a whole session dedicated to more going into implants. So we're going to talk a lot more about implants for next week's session. Paul, one thing we also might do is we might come over to our panorama window, and before we place that implant, what we could also do is we could take our measurements across the ridge here.
Right.
To go through and look at our implant sizes there on that. We can, another option specifically for the sectional window is as I scroll through here, Paul, right now I'm scrolling at our 1 millimeter intervals. So every time I scroll with the wheel on my mouse, I can see I'm in slice number 126. I'm on the distal edge here of number 20. As I scroll through, we can go across that ridge. To mesial of 18, we're on 135 here. So going by our 1 millimeter increments, we can change that right to the center of our implant there. All right, let's go ahead and double click here. Also through our sectional window, what I do like to do is I like to trace the nerve. So you can see our nerve, inferior alveolar nerve down here. I can see my cortication around that, and it looks to me like it's sitting on the lingual wall here. Let's go through here and we can see that going back. And I'm gonna back this in here to the ramus. I'm gonna go ahead and rotate this around, and we can see our nerve traced right here. So if I do want to trace my nerve, I can come up to draw canal, and I'm just gonna go ahead and click right in the center of the nerve bundle, I'm gonna call it. Scroll 3 or 4 times, click here, click, and just follow that all the way through the mental frame, and then if there's an anterior loop there. And we can go through here, and I'm gonna go ahead and double click, and we can see our nerve traced through on our panorama window down there.
Great.
Well, I did notice over here on our panorama view, when we looked at our 3D, something a little interesting is 232 over here. We can see impacted tooth, partially erupted, but we can see the nerve going through here. Over here, we can see the inferior border and the superior border. But let's utilize the nerve, the draw curve specifically for that tooth.
Sure.
All right, so I'm actually going to stay within my sectional window, and I'm going to go over here to draw curve, and I'm going to scroll here because I know I want to be in the mandible, which I already am. And as I scroll, notice the white line down here moving, so I can see my molars here. I'm going to go click, going clockwise again. I'm just going to take this right to the midline, and now we can see we just have our lower right here. Let's talk back about why using the sectional window, because once I close out of the software, I come back in, I want to be able to go to my curve window and say, here's my workup in my mandible for my implant nerve. Here is my full pan that we worked up. Now we're going to look at our third molar here and kind of work up this case. So to look at this molar, I would grab my sectional slice, move it back here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. So it'll rotate at the angle that we want it to go through the long axis of the tooth. You'll also notice it's going to be going perpendicular to the nerve itself there.
Right.
Let's double click here. And if I scroll back into the ramus, we're going to look at our inferior alveolar nerve. we're going to go over here to draw a nerve. I'm going to scroll back in the ramus here a bit, and let's click a point here and scroll through. Well, one question I get is a lot is, where can I draw my nerve? I can draw my nerve on any window. If I come over here to my panorama window, I can place a point there, and let's see how that is. Now, to me, that looks like we're right on the nerve, but I'm at a 10 millimeter focal trough, so that does not look like we're in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and hide that, or delete that actually, and now we can scroll forward and place our next point. Looks like we're coming up on that distal root here, and I'm going to say that we're on our buccal side. We can see our nerve on the buccal side. I want to move that just a little bit, get it right here in the center, and we can scroll there. We can look at the relationship of our roots there, and as we keep coming forward, we're going towards our distal root or second molar, and note that it is crossing over, going to the lingual wall, and now we can follow that through. And if I wanted to, I could follow this all the way through the mental foramen. Click here, and I'm going to go ahead and double click. And now I can see, as I scroll here, I can see my nerve with the relationship of that molar. And we can go ahead and look here. So what we can now analyze is our nerve compared to our root, and how would we section that out to remove that tooth there.
So if we need to edit that, we can also do a right click. There's some options on there.
Heading to the nerve, I can right click here. I can go down to edit canal, and we can change our slices there. Once I'm done editing, I can exit editing mode and hit OK. Other things with the nerve, if I right click, I can go to property, and let's say we want to make that a 3 millimeter bundle, or maybe change that to yellow. So customize it for what you want. You can do that again in our settings up here under main menu, so it will trace at a certain diameter each time on there through that. And let's go ahead and double click here, and now we're back to our sectional window. Last week we looked at our change layout, and I can see my layout right now. I'm on my first layout here. If we wanted to change that or look at a different one, I can always right click, set as default, and then once I come back here, it's going to give us our different windows, just a different layout. So that's kind of a personal preference for you. So I'm going to go back to my change layout, and we're going to go back to our 9 windows on there.
Right.
All right. Paul, we looked at our molar here, and I would like to look at one more way, or a couple more ways to draw the curve. So we've been drawing around the arch going clockwise. Let's look at this molar in a different view. So I'm going to go draw a canal. I'm going to go here starting out buccal and go across lingual and double click here. So now we're getting more of a, I'm going to call it a lateral or a sagittal view. And as I go out lateral, we can come back across medial. We can see our nerve, we can see our roots, and we can see the reference in the third molar in relationship to our second molar. We're going to look at it kind of right in here. We can see our nerve, which will be tracing through there, and then of our roots going there, and that partially erupted tooth there. So different ways to look at different cases, depending on the clinical need for what you're using the software for your profession. All right.
Hey Jim, can we address a common question that I get a lot is what is the difference between, because I think it's really important. So what is the difference between the slice thickness and the slice interval and those different kind of dynamics?
Sure. Great question. So let's talk about our toolbar over here off to the side. We have our curve, and right here we have our thickness and interval, but we also have our panorama thickness and interval. Let's start with our panorama. We've really looked at our thickness and our interval down here. So let's hit escape here, and I'm going to change my thickness down to a really thin slice. So we can see we're down here to almost less than a millimeter. My interval is every time I come down here in my panorama view, I'm going to use the wheel on my mouse. And if you notice, as I scroll, I've scrolled out buccal. You can see our green line right here. So we're out in our soft tissue. That's why we're not seeing anything in this window. As I use the wheel on my mouse, we're going to scroll back across lingual, and we're going across that ridge. So every time I scroll, that interval, each time I scroll is 1 millimeter. I think this can also be explained. We should also explain this over for our sectional slices would be another way to look at that. So the interval here, we're set at 1 millimeter, and each time I scroll slice 28, we're moving that slice 1 millimeter increment. The thickness right here, let's change that up to 1 millimeter. That's going to be the mesial distal thickness of our slice right there. So that's kind of a way to explain that.
Right. Okay. So the thickness there is the width essentially, and the interval is the distance between your slices.
That's a very good summary. Yes.
Okay. Great.
All right. Let's go back to our MPR window, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll. Let's grab up into the maxilla. Maybe we've done implants, quick overview. We've looked at we've looked at extractions. Now let's go ahead and look at some endo here. So as we were doing our overall analysis of our image here, let's go ahead and we noticed tooth number 3, our first molar here, we noticed we might have a 4th canal. So I'm going to use your control and use the wheel on my mouse to enlarge that. And I'm going to come up here and use my hand to pan over to our site here. So let's focus right in this area. Paul, easy way to do that you were talking about is just double clicking on here, and it's going to kind of take all of our windows, all of our slices, axial slice, sagittal, and coronal right to that tooth. I know you like using your sharpen, so let's sharpen that up, or maybe use our Mac sharpen. So we're applying some filters to that, and as I do that, if you can look at our spotlight here, you can see our individual canals. So I'm kind of focusing right in here to look at that between whenever I turn my sharpen on off here. So let's do this. Let's turn that off, turn that on. So it does give us a little higher contrast or add some of those filters there. We'll also use our inverse tool here. But specific to this, I'm going to go ahead and right click over here. And Paul, you want to talk about tracing the nerve specific to endo through a little bit different way?
Right, the curve. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at number 3 there, we can see we're intersected over that tooth we want to take a look at. We can kind of scroll to, depending on the position that we want to see the roots a little bit better. We can scroll there. And then we're going to use the curve function a little bit differently. So instead of going around the arch, we're going to be doing it through the tooth. So we're going to start, and we're going to do our series of clicks, start up in the upper sinus area. We'll go right down through the furcation, right down through the occlusal surface, just clicking along the way. We can angle that, and then we can do a double click right in that airspace there. And what that's going to do is that's going to do a curve again, and now we're in the section tab, and we can just scroll through that there. We can see it on the scout view as we scroll through those slices, that red line will kind of go up and down. Right through that tooth, and we can get a better look at it. We are at 1 millimeter increments on this, so if we want to see the best kind of view or the most detail, we'll put that down to 0.1 or 1/10 of a millimeter. So as we scroll through that curve, we can kind of get the best view. Obviously, we can sharpen, Mac sharpen, those types of tools on the left as well.
True. So Paul, what you did is you went over to there. We changed our intervals down to a 1/10 of a millimeter. So we're almost scrolling the way a doctor told me. It's almost like a fluid line as you scroll through on there. Now, as we go through this, we talked about some of our tools here: sharpening, Mac sharpen. We are on a 12:9 scan, so we're on a larger scan. The next couple scans we're going to look at are going to be our 5x5. So as we are scanning smaller, our voxel size here, we're looking between a 0.12 and a 0.2. If we go down to our 5x5, we can go down to that 0.08 voxel size, and we're going to look at some differences on the imaging when we do a smaller scan for that. So, but let's continue here. So we double click to go to our 9 windows, or double click to go back to our single window, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll up, change maybe our sharpening tool here. And we talked last week about right clicking and dragging, and I can change my brightness and contrast here to give a little higher contrast through there. So can we see that nerve. Paul, what about another way to trace through the nerve, maybe highlighting a single root there?
Right. So we can do another curve right on that scout screen. It's really nice because we can do the curve, we can kind of customize the curvature of it. So we can do our curve again, same process. We're just going to click right like through the canal. But this time we can kind of customize the angle of it as we go through that canal, so we get kind of a flat plane view going through the entire image.
And I'm going to darken that up a bit and maybe do my sharpening tool and see if that will highlight that canal a little bit better through there. So right now I would say, to me, what I'm seeing is my here, canal, 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 and canal there. Through there. And let's go ahead and click on our escape, and we can scroll down inferior or scroll back through superior. So that's, now take a note over here, first curve all the way through our sixth curve that we've drawn different ways to draw the canal through there. All right. Paul, any other tools you think we should show specific to this scan, or is now a good time maybe to go to a smaller 5x5 scan?
We have some questions coming in. We'll get to those, but yeah, I think if we looked at a smaller size, maybe a 5x5, it'd be great.
Sounds good. So I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to open up. We were on our 12x9. We're going to go up to our 5x5 up here. So let's click here. Notice our different fields of view. Here's our 5x5 field of view, and we've got some screenshots. I'm going to go ahead and double click here, and it's going to go ahead and launch our 3D-i software on that. While we're waiting for that, the 5x5 scan itself is a 4.9 second scan, so it's a very fast scan. The 12x9 scan is going to take about 9 seconds. So the time for scanning is going to be even less than a pan, which optimizes image quality, but also what it's going to do is it's less chance for the patient to move when they're getting scanned. So we're going to look at some patient movement images at the top of the hour, and that's one way to really minimize movement, is the time that the scan goes around the patient's head there. All right, this is almost open here. So here we have our 5x5 scan, and let's open this up, and I'm going to go ahead and right click here and switch to main view. And you can see my 5x5 scan. So we've got our 5 centimeters by our 5 centimeters in height there. And I'm going to change this back to my AP view. All right, now I'm on my grayscale there. What I really like using this when we're looking at endo, because you can really see those canals. And actually, we have something back here. We have our impacted third. So we're going to follow the same protocol we talked about when we started. Right-clicking here, switch to main view. We're going to grab our axial slice, move this to the superior border of the scan, hit the space bar. Now I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. So notice the 5x5 on here. We can see our canals. I'm going to say a little bit more in detail than our 12x9, but look at the PDL around the teeth as we scroll through that. Coming down through the occlusion, we can see our tooth there, second molar. This is really the area we're focusing on. And I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. As we do that axial slice, we can see our treated canals and possibly some communication here. And let's go ahead and scroll down, opening it up there. We have our larger granuloma there. I can see my nerve here. And now we're mental frame, and now we're to the bottom of the scan. So what I'd like to do is let's scroll back up like we did the last scan. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the area of interest. And Paul, we talked about maybe rotating this line around a bit to go through the long axis of that. And tell us about a little bit what we're doing here.
So rotating that just kind of gets a better view in the sagittal there, in my opinion.
Right.
So now we'll switch to the sagittal view. Also, Jim, I think it's good to point out that the 5x5, it's a little bit of a higher res shot in typical 2-voxel shot versus a 0.08. So
correct. Yeah, we can look at even just the quality of this. We can see the higher quality of that image there, looking through the canals the nerve. So yeah, you are getting a higher detail when you do the specific 5x5 area. We looked at our larger scan for secondary findings. We found our implant site. We found our 4 molars. We even found a couple MB2s. But here we did a small 5x5 specific for our tooth, but we can also see a impaction here. Is there any relationship to that second molar? But Paul, let's go ahead and look at this for endo. What I'm going to do, if I go up to draw a curve again, I'm going to click here, trace this down. I'm going to go ahead and double click. And now we're going to have our curve drawn right here. So what we did last time is we grabbed our axial view here, move this up to the occlusal surface, and at our 1 millimeter interval, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And we can highlight and look through our different areas. We looked at this communication here, scrolling down inferior. We open up to that infection of that granuloma there. Let's go here, take a measurement, going across and through there. We can drag these out, and that's going to be, maybe we'll do a screenshot here. Take a full screenshot there. Talked about right clicking and deleting.
Right.
And clicking and deleting here. Does it make a difference when we change our intervals down to maybe 1/10 of a millimeter and scroll here? We're just going a really small increments to give a full view of that area. And going through there. Coming back to our MPR, let's look at this in a different view. Switch to main view. Draw a curve here. Let's go across the ridge. Double click. Takes us back to our section window. And now we can scroll. And when we can go back across buckle there, we can follow our roots there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop right about here. Let's look at some tools specific for endo and measuring tools. So I can take my measurement tool here. I can measure point A to point B. But what I really like to do is follow the curvature of my root here. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and hide that. Let's look at our measurement tool here, the multi-length tool. So with multi-length, we can click here, and I'm going to just click right through the center of that root. And I'm just clicking anytime I want to change and double click. It's going to give us the total working length right there. So if I come here to my mesial root, we can click and just follow that through. Double click, and there's going to be our working length there. Other options, scroll, let's look at our next tooth there. Let's go to draw, and you can see this a little bit better away from that gutta percha there. Just kind of click through that. And we can double click here, and there's our total working length. From here, what I might do is I might come up to my measurement. Let's go capture here. And this time I really just want to look at capture region. So I just want to focus on this. I'm going to left click and drag and just capture that region out right there, through there. And that's all I really want to focus on that window, through there. All right, and that's going to be a second 5x5 case, or our 5x5 case, where we can look through and see our individual canals through there. We went across the ridge. We also went through the long axis, down inferior, and then back up superior there. So let's look at a couple of tools of showing this to the patient or sharing with the patient. I have my consult tool here. And you can notice in consult, we briefly covered this last week, but let's look at this for this week. We have all of our images here. So I could drag my image here. I could come over to my different treatments. So we're on root canal treatment. We have all of our different options down here for a root canal treatment there. One thing is nice with this, I can also go to my favorites list where I've added some as favorites. And what I just did is I right clicked and I clicked on add to favorite. And now that will add down into my favorites list on the bottom of the screen over here. Let's move this over here. Some questions I do get would be, is there sound with the consult? So there is no sound, but it gives us a good chance to talk to our patients about the clinical tools and educate them on what we're doing. I think a lot of doctors have mentioned to me, like, I'd rather have them watch this than go home and watch a YouTube video and not really be sure what they're watching. Also in your consult window, you can come over to change layout. And if you want to expand your windows out, you can go here, hit OK. And we can expand our windows to different views through here and add those on there. These are different ways to look at that. We have a whole suite of videos over here. We also looked at implant dentistry today. We're doing our implants. So it has a quick video there for basic, just educate the patient a little bit on our implants.
Another nice feature with this console tab is you can make your own videos and import them. So yeah, you can you can use any standard video format when you record your videos. Whether you're recording it yourself or you have another source of videos, you can import them, make your own categories, all from the editor here on the left. So it's really customizable, which is nice.
Right, and we do have a complete video in our video library of how to add those implants. You can see I've added a couple down here, different videos where I've added on how to do that. So you can go through, and if you want to hide different videos, if you're not worried about certain specialties, you can hide those so you don't see them in the full list. But most of my offices are doing a right click to do favorites, so we can have their hygienists talking about different clinical education for our patients after their treatment while they're waiting for the doctor to come in on there. All right. So I think, maybe we should kind of review the different ways we drew our curve today. We looked at number one, changing our layout, customizing the layout for what's best for your office or for you. We looked at some settings, going to main menu, down to settings here. We went to our view tab and the 2D viewer and the different settings you can change. We can change under our panorama view. We can change it to any desired thickness, 0 all the way up to, I believe, 30 or 40. Our default interval, our default height, right now it's at 5 centimeters. If you want to have that default height, you can definitely do that. You can change your zoom over here if you would like to do that. On there, so that's our settings. We looked at top to bottom over here, changing our thickness and our interval. So under here, curve, the thickness is going to be the thickness of each slice. The interval is every time we scroll, how far apart when we move those, when we scroll from 195 to 196. Panorama view, thickness is going to be our focal trough, and then the interval as we're scrolling down here in our panorama view there through that. All right, let's go back to our NPR. We looked at 3 different ways to draw the curve. Here is the first going through the long axis of the tooth. Our second is going across the ridge. And then what we did first we did is we went draw the curve around the arch here, through the arch, and double click. And that gives us our recreated panoramic view there. So 3 different ways to draw the curve: through the long axis, across the ridge, and then we're going to go following the arch there through that. This will be more implant planning focused and extractions through here on that. Well, how are we looking on questions there?
We got a ton of questions, which is great. Maybe let me kind of look at some of those and we can discuss. Maybe our question from last week was about scan movement.
Maybe Patient movement, yeah, so that's a good idea. So let's talk about patient movement. What I've done here is I've taken some screenshots. Let's click here on patient movement, and I'm gonna go over here to my viewer, and we're gonna focus on our two windows here. So first, let's focus here and here. So I'm gonna use my zoom tool here to zoom in on this a bit. Let's zoom this a bit, and that panning tool, and I just wanna focus on my 3D rendering right here. So I would say the one on the right definitely does not look desirable. The one on the left, we can see the detail, the crest of the ridge, a lot of nice detail there. But really what I'm doing is focusing more on my axial, sagittal, or coronal slice, and I'm gonna enlarge these a bit more to focus in on those. So the one over here on the right, we do have some patient movement, and how am I gonna identify that is you can see this kind of streaking effect coming off of the image here. And what we call that is kind of a micro movement. If the patient moves, you're gonna get a double image. Look over here on the left, we can see a nice clean line where we don't have any patient movement through there. Main thing to be able to eliminate patient movement, make sure they are biting on the bite stick, make sure they do have their chin firmly on the chin rest, and then we also want to make sure that they close their eyes, relax, and breathe through their nose. What that's going to do is going to eliminate them watching the tube head go around their head there. I do have a pretty interesting image down here. Image is not so good. One of my doctors had texted this to me and said, hey, I'm trying to work up this case, or I don't think the image looks very good. I'm kind of worried. This is a really good example taken from my phone. Let's look at overall here. If I go spotlight, we have our bite stick here. It appears they're biting on the bite stick, but look at the labial edge here. You can see the chin. You can also see a double image right here. So that's really shows us that there is some patient movement. I can see here the mandible. I can see another border of the mandible. So that's really showing that patient movement there. I'm gonna look at my hyoid bone down here. We can see the reflection streaking off of that hyoid bone. And then lastly, my soft palate here, we can see a double image with that soft palate. So if you're seeing this, we really need to address patient movement, because the desired image we want is going to be this image here, where we can have the patient, if you have to get creative, we can have the patient sit in the chair. Remember, our scan time is either 4.9 or 5 seconds through 9-second scan is usually going to be the scan time there on that. All right. Well, Paul, what other questions came in today?
So we have a question here. Can a 12:9 field of view show all the maxillary sinus?
So let's look at kind of a highlight of our 12:9 here. So this is just kind of what we're seeing on our 12:9, a basic diagram. We do have 9 centimeters tall. So when you're capturing, you do have your, here's our reconstructed pan. So from inferior border of the chin, or I'm going to say from the base of the chin rest, tall, we have 9 centimeters if you're using your regular chin block. We do have another chin block, which is a smaller chin block that you have options of using, which will lower the patient down. When you do use that lower chin block, it's going to cut off about 2 centimeters the mandible, and we are going to capture further superior in the sinus if we wanted to capture up in the ostium and higher up through there. So yes, you can capture further in the sinus, but you may cut off some of the inferior border of the chin there on your 12:9.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
Sure. Well, in a few weeks, we're going to be looking at some anatomy, just doing an overall anatomy view and looking specifically at fields of view of, what field of view are we capturing in our 12:9, or maybe what field of view are we capturing in our 17:15. If we need to expand out for additional functions of maybe sleep and airway, if we need to make sure we capture the condyles. So this is, all questions to think about of what are we capturing. Here's our larger scan, and you can see we are definitely getting our condyles and even into that superior sinus there. So that's kind of some previews of asking field of view questions and what sizes we have there. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and what's our next question on the list there?
So this is I can't remember if we addressed it in this session, but it's an important one. Is it necessary to draw the curve from left to right, clockwise, counterclockwise? What's the correct thinking behind that?
The correct thinking? Sure. Basically, when we're drawing the curve, and let me go ahead and open up my 12:9 scan, why we want to go ahead and draw our curve in the clockwise fashion is we're going to get our reconstructed pan, which is going to look exactly like we're seeing on our the pans that we're used to seeing on our two-dimensional pan. So once this opens, we're going to come back here and we'll look at drawing the curve counterclockwise and what that renders for us. So this will be here open here in a second. And I'm still going to go back to, this is a good yeah, let's open this here. Let's go over to our first curve we did. I think it's going to be the second one we want to look at because we enlarged that. And let's note our right side and our left side. So I can see my spotlight for right and over here for left. Let's go ahead and draw our curve opposite. So I'm going to go here, draw curve, going counterclockwise around the arch. And I would probably want to go ahead and expand this out. And now notice your annotations over here of orientation. We have our spotlight of our right side and our left side. So you can draw it however you would like, but if you want your orientation to be what you're used to seeing on your panorama views, I'm going to go ahead and draw it clockwise to give us our right side and our left side on there. Pretty good? Okay.
Yeah, looks great.
One question I did notice on the list down here that came in is, the question was, I noticed that you drew the curve, or when you open this back up, you have all your sectional slices here, right? So once you close out, it saves your all of your work. So all the cases that I saved are going to be on here.
Great.
Through there. Yeah. Paul, let's take another quick break. We know we told everyone we're going to end the session at the top of the hour and then to do the question and answer there. So if people have to leave, we understand, but we would really like you to stick around. Paul's going to go through some more questions on there, and let me go through and talk just a little bit about what we have coming up, and then we're going to jump right back into our question and answer session. So Paul, if you want to go through and look at your question and answer session there, I will go ahead and talk about what we have coming up. One thing, appreciate everybody who has signed on today. We have our education center. So you can choose your device over here to look at those videos. You have your software, Ez3D-i. Today we did record our session. We also recorded last week's session. I would really like you to, if you could, log in and watch last week's. It's going to build to next week. There's our webinar there.
Yeah, Jim, there was a couple questions. How can I watch the last week's session? So just want to reiterate that.
Yeah, so go to our website, vatechamerica.com here, and then we're going to go over to our webinar session right here. And it's going to be through Customer Learning Center. You're going to log in and you can watch your webinar here. Service and support. We're very proud of our service and our support through Vatech. When you are at your office, you need to call into our Vatech support. I want everybody to be aware we do have our question and answer here, our FAQ with our technical support. So go vatechamerica.com, come down to FAQ. You can, some common questions that are asked that you can do a quick Q&A. It gives you bullet points, exactly how to do this, some videos, how to export CT images from Ez3D-i, maybe what size flash drive should I be using when I export, what should I use to sanitize my device. So a lot of different questions like that are on that Q&A session right there. So that's something that's really popular for everybody to see. And then we also have our webinar for next week, which is going to be our implant planning, quick, easy, but accurate through there on that. So Paul, maybe we should jump back into our Q&A there. So
Okay.
thanks for everybody attending. Let's get back into our question and answer session.
Great. Yeah, we got a lot of great questions. We'll just kind of rip through these as fast as we can. So here's a good one. After hiding the measurement lines on the section slices, how do you make them visible again?
Perfect. So as I'm understanding, the sectional line, so if I, right here, if I hit the space bar.
I think they're referring to the measurement lines on this, like when you're putting an implant in.
Gotcha. Understand. So I'm going to go here. We're going to take a measurement. We'll just take a measurement through that tooth. We right clicked to hide. Let's look at our measurement tools here. We're going to go down to etc. And actually on and off here. And we can go through this last icon, which is going to show manager. So here's all the work we did, all the workups we did through there. So if I click on my length, it's going to toggle these on and off. So let's say we did want to work up a case and show the patient. Technically, I could hide all. We could bring this up and I could come back here or show all. We could hide all. So we can hide everything at once through there and go through that. So it's going to be under your on and off. So the drop down from measurement to on and off. Then we come over to our last icon here and we can go show or hide all to show, or just individual ones. If I want to get rid of my canals, hit OK. So that's where everything's going to be hidden through there on that. All right. I'm going to go here and right click and we're going to go ahead and delete.
Okay. Another question here. How do we make implants defaulted to a certain manufacturer?
Yes. So let's go to our implant. I'll run through this and I would encourage everyone to stick around or sign in for next week because we're really going to go through some highlighting a lot of these implants. But we demoed tooth number 19 here, which we had set to Straumann and a specific tooth. So when we click on here, it goes there right away. I'm going to come here to tooth number 20. I'm going to click on user. We're going to type in our M for Megagen. We're going to come down to choose our implant. So we'll just say our any ridge. I'm going to come over here to the right, scroll through, just pick a random implant. We'll click here. I'm going to click on, so here's how you're going to go set as default. So what I did was I went over to my insert implant over here, chose my implant here, went to the company lineup, chose the individual implant. Before I hit insert, let's go ahead and click on set as default. That way, the next time I click on insert here, it's going to place my implant, but let's go back into implant. We're going to go to tooth 20, and that should have been saved, but it did not. Let's try that again. So let's go Megagen, choose that, set as default, hit OK, insert, and that implant's placed. Now we should be able to go back in there and find our implant through there. So I forgot to hit set as default on there before I place that implant. So that's going to do that. So I encourage everybody to tune in next week because we're going to go through this implant property window in detail of when we want to place a single implant, if we want to place multiple on one ridge or in one quadrant, looking at our guide and our path. Also, I want to look down here. We're going to be placing our crown. What is this placement for access and click point? So a lot of really neat features within the Vatech software that we're going to be looking at next week during our session through there. All right, Paul, what other questions do we have that are coming in? I really appreciate everybody who's sticking around today. We still have a lot of attendees online, so we really do appreciate you sticking around until past the top of the hour there.
Awesome. How far apart should my mouse clicks or my points be when you're drawing the curve?
I'm going to say that is going to be a personal preference for you. So I think what we're referring to is if I draw my curve, if I keep clicking really close together, or do I place a point here, place a point here? So Let's go draw a curve. I teach it to I'm going to click back in the ramus, and I go about every other tooth through there. And just click right down the center of the canal or right through the center of the ridge. I will say that if you trace more than 30 points, so if I come through here and if I keep clicking really close and I hit 30, it's going to say you cannot choose more than 30 points. It'll default saying you have too many points. So I would say use your best judgment. I hit 30, it says you have too many points there. Also, my curve does look not the best. So I go through and click about every other tooth. So draw curve, center of the ridge, click, next tooth, click, and I'm trying to follow right down the center of the ridge to make a nice pan curve around the arch there. And double click. And that takes us to our new curve window there. All right. Other questions, Paul?
For the nerve tool, can we have fewer than 10 points? That's going to be a yes, right?
Fewer than 10 points? Yeah, I can. When I'm drawing my nerve, I can just click. I mean, I can do 3 if I want. You can do any number. All we're really doing when we draw our curve is just placing a point, and double clicking to draw our line there. That's what we're doing there.
Okay. How do you draw a curve in a thin and atropic jaw?
Really, so if I scroll up or down and you need to find that ridge, I'm just going to scroll lower, further inferior, or higher. What we could do here is let's do our reset. And I'm going to turn this to the left. And now if I go to my axial slice, and I can look at my blue line here. So look what happens in my 3D window here if I rotate this to follow the angle of the mandible there. And now if I right click here and enlarge that, so I'm going to do the best I can when I'm scrolling up or down to find that ridge. So if it's really thin, I'm going to do the best I can. If I got to go really further inferior, I can always draw the curve down here and do that for my curve tool there. I'm going to get rid of some of my curves. One question I do have all the time is, how come I cannot draw any more curves? And you can see I have all 8 curves here, so I can right click, delete all curves or delete one. So let's delete here. We can delete curve number 7, delete right there. So different ways to delete those curves.
Okay. And then another question, how do you draw a curve with an edentulous patient? So I think it's kind of the same thing you're talking about right now.
Yeah, same thing. I would just go far enough down in the ridge to where we can see a nice ridge here. And sometimes we may need to, if you have that steep speed of the angle there, look what happens when I change the angle here. I can find that ramus that flows further. So if I come up here and I do go about subcrestal there,
yeah,
really there's no right or wrong answer with drawing it further subcrestal through there.
Here's another kind of random question. What's the difference between this software that we're in right now and Ez3D Plus?
So right now we are in it's called Ez3D-i. This is our software that was launched a few years back. The differences are going to be really workflow. The main difference we didn't touch on today is going to be this 3D pan window. One of the main differences, also placing your implants, the workflow for placing your implants, and then angling your sectional window. So I'm going to jump back here, but one of the main differences between Plus and this is you can rotate through here. Other difference, we'll spend just a few minutes on this. We can grab our window, move this, and then rotate this here. And we talked about our session next week, which is going to be more implant focused. We're also going to use this window, but in 2 weeks or on the 22nd, we're going to have Dr. Todd Engel join us of the Engel Institute, and he's going to go over what he calls his 5 clicks to yes, which is really utilizing this 3D pan window to talk to our patients and educate them and tell them their story about their dental health and talk to them about different clinical uses with that. But this is another big difference from the Ez3D Plus. And then the last one I want to touch on for that Ez3D Plus question is for those doctors out there who have that, look at the rendering here on our teeth. We have our bone, we have our MIP. So some different renderings within this software. We've made it really simple to look through the images there on that. But a good question, Paul. What else you got for me there, Paul?
Dr. Perry's asking for a step-by-step, just real quick, how to get on the Customer Learning Center really quick.
Sure. Let me do this. I'm going to pause my screen here and let me get to that, and I'll show you exactly step-by-step getting to our Customer Learning Center. All right, so I have my Vatech web page up. I just went to vatechamerica.com. If I click on Customer Support here, we can look at our Customer Learning Center. I'm going to click on either my imaging device over here, right here, 2D, intraoral, or my software. We're looking at the Ez3D-i. If you wanted to get a, pardon?
Sorry, Jim. This other question, which just ties right into what you're going to say, is the software updated automatically, or should I be requesting an update?
So let's do this. This will lead us into, here's our software, here's the webinar, but let's talk about our FAQ page and talking with service. So I think this rolls us right into our service and support. Here's our FAQ page that we can go to if you have any questions on that. But if I go back up to Vatech, we can scroll down and we do have our support center that has all of our software updates. So you come here to your Ez3D-i, I can click here and it's going to show us how to download that. We recommend you go here, work with your IT department. It has all the instructions for uploading the new versions are all going to be in that Vatech America tab, be it Ez3D-i or our Ez3D-i updates there. So that's where you can find your updates on that.
Great.
If you have questions on the computer specs, I'm up, right now. I've had a lot of doctors call me saying, hey, we're closed down. Now's a good time to get my IT department in there, make sure all my computers are updated, change some things there. Go to vatechamerica.com. Here's the computer requirements for the Ez3D-i software. So you can really find everything within this Vatech America website here on there. And then future webinars, you can click over here on our webinar schedule and it takes us down. And here's the 2 future webinars. Look for later today or tomorrow, we're going to add our April 22nd and our April 29th for next week. Just click on learn more. It'll take you right over where you can go ahead and upload or go ahead and enter your information. We had our past symposium. We haven't talked about that yet, but Dr. Engel, he's going to be here in a couple weeks. Check out his courses, his website here. You can get more information down here for the Engel Institute. If you do want to take, I know a lot of our Vatech users have worked with the M1 all the way through the M5 courses. So you do have courses through here, really exciting and educational topics that we've partnered with there. All right. I think that kind of does it for the Vatech software there on that. Great. Other 3D questions come in? Anything with the 3D-i software?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to address this now, but a couple of questions came in about identifying a root fracture.
Sounds good. I'll tell you what, I do have a 5x5 here. It's not the one we looked at, but let's double click and let's look at this and we can go through maybe some systematic ways to identify a root fracture within the software, 3 or 4 different tools. Honestly, we've kind of looked at some of them today of drawing the curves different ways. We've also talked about changing our intervals. One thing we have not used is our oblique tool, but this is one thing that I always urge or I suggest to my doctors is start getting our radiologists involved. If we do need to look for different pathologies, excuse me, or our specialists, for these root fractures. So let's look and see what this scan is. It looks like this is going to be a 5x5 scan. Let's go ahead and let this load here. All right, so here's our smaller 5x5 scan, taking one from our G2 model. I'm going to go here in my axial. Let's do our same scan overview, switch to main view. I'm going to grab my axial slice and move this to the superior border. And I'm going to hit my spacebar and let's scroll down inferior. And it'll actually go back up and we can identify our canals, the ridge. Let's scroll down. Getting into the mandible here. And we can see, I'm going to say that's possibly a communication right over here. I can identify my canals as we scroll through. We're going down inferior, the bottom of the scan. So what would be some ways we talked about to look for a root fracture on this or identify different canals? What I'm going to do is rotate my sagittal slice across, enlarge my sagittal window, and let's start with drawing the curve through the long axis of the tooth. Occlusal surface through the furcation, down through the roots, double click. And I do have my one curve drawn over here. So let's double click and scroll up. I might come over and change my intervals. I'm not going to take it quite down to a 1/10. I'm going to take it to about a 1/2 millimeter. And let's scroll through that. And looking at our canals here, I guess my question to all of my endodontists and my dentists out there is I would consider that the area of concern. Communication over here. And scrolling down, we can see that infection there. Scrolling back up, to the occlusal surface. Another way to look at that, let's do our max sharpen, see if that changes it at all. Scrolling up and then back down inferior. Maybe right clicking and dragging to get a little more detail on that. All right. Let's go back to MPR. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge my axial slice, switch this to the main view. And let's go to our draw curve across the ridge. Now we have more of our, I'm going to call it our sagittal slice. We can scroll across. I'm going to go ahead and change my intervals down to a 1/10 this time. And come across here. So my question would be, let's put an annotation there, right there. We can also grab this, we can draw our arrow. And let's look at our screenshots to capture. I want to capture one window right here. I want to capture this with the overlay. I also want to capture right here without overlay. So whenever I do send this off to my specialist or look at that, talking to the patient, here are my 2 screenshots that we can show on there. Let's go back to our MPR. Looks like, what curves did we draw? We did the first one through the long axis, the second one across the ridge. Lastly, let's go ahead and go draw a curve and go through the long axis of the ridge here, following the teeth. Change my interval out to 1, and now we can scroll across. Maybe do our rotate here and go through our image all the way through there. This I use more so for my implants and extractions. Let's see if we take it down to a 1/10 if we can see that detail on there. So maybe something in there, but yeah, I would focus more on my first or second image there to interpret that as some issue, possibly a root fracture through there. If we're not sure, that's where I'm exporting this to my radiologist to get an overall read on that. To export that, we talked about that in the Q&A. I can right click here. I can go export and that's going to allow us to export that to the desktop or wherever we need to export that to our radiologist there. All right. How are we doing with our questions, Paul? I know we're just about to the bottom of the hour. Still looks like we have a good number of people online here.
Somebody saying that after 10 clicks, that's the maximum doing a curve. Is that true? So you can only do 10 points on a curve?
I'm assuming we're talking here, we can do 30 clicks. So
Okay,
30. Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna change my intervals back so we can see that. So we talked about this earlier. We can click here. We can do 30 points. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so we can do 30 clicks is what that's gonna be through there.
Right. Okay. Dr. Kozik is asking, what is the best uses for the section tab compared to the NPR tab along with the 3D pan tab? And there was another question earlier, kind of the similar thing, you know, doctor asking, you know, I use the 3D-i, I'm sorry, the 3D pan tab exclusively, does everything I need. Why do I need to use the section tab?
Great question. Yeah, so why I like using the section tab is when I'm in my 3D pan tab and I'm going to show a patient, I have to scroll around and look and take some screenshots. Let's let this load. What I like about the sectional window is it will catalog all of my work. So I can go back into this case once it's been saved. And if I want to go exactly back to that clinical workup that I have, it's already going to be loaded there. So I don't have to re-show the patient my image there. So let's go back to section here and look at my first curve I've drawn, superior, inferior, my second curve across the ridge, my third curve going down the long axis of the ridge, and my fourth curve going through the ridge here also. So once I close out, it's going to save all of these curves. So if I open back up to my NPR window and say, okay, I know where we're looking at some issues here with this first molar, but I want to go back into my section. What do I have? What case planning do I have? Here's my first case planning, second, third, and fourth. When I go to my 3D pan, and I do need to redraw this, we'll look at this again in a couple weeks or actually next week for redrawing the pan, but let's get a nice image here for the small 5x5. Really nice window to use. I'm not saying don't use the 3D pan, but think about using the sectional tab for more complex cases or for saving the work that you've done when you've created your panoramic curve there. So
great. Okay.
What questions do we have for us, Paul? Well, let's look through here. So if I go through here, well, let me do this really quick. So if I go through here and I show this, I can still come down here and get all the windows I want, take my screenshots. But when I hit reset, I'm back to my original plan. I have to go back and find the work I want to do. Where here, I just have to come in and click on my individual scans.
Right. I like using the section tab for more complicated cases because you have, you know, your one nice curve for the entire arch going through there. So
other thing we can't do on here is with our 3D pans, I cannot draw on my 3D rendering. So I really can't go mesial distal or buccal, or mesial distal across there. Whereas a section, I can come in here and I can take all my measurements that I want on my pan, plus my window over here on there. All right.
Okay.
So two more questions, Paul, and I think we're at about the bottom of the hour. What else do you have for me? Let's hit maybe one or two more. And for those people who we haven't answered their questions, please tune in next week. We'll add them to the list. Or I think my education team, Paul and Leonard, or I'm sorry, Andrew and Leonard, have been following up with you where you can get a question to us on there. Yes, go ahead.
I think we got them all except for two, and one's a repeat. So once you have hidden a nerve, how do you see that back again? So just like the measurements, if they're in the same area.
Yeah, so let's go here. Let's scroll posterior. Let's click. Let's scroll. I'm just going to put a short nerve on there. So I can see my nerve here traced. We're going to go ahead and right click, hide that. Under capture, on and off. Click here. Here's my canal turned on or turned off. So basically we went to our drop down. went to on and off, over here to our hide or show manager, clicked on my canal, or hide and show all through there. All right.
Okay. Last question. And we did cover this, but I think it's important. So you said the interval is the distance between the slices. This is from Dr. Barker. Does this mean that the info is not seen?
Very good point. So Dr. Barker, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change my interval to 5 millimeter through here. So let's scroll posterior into the ramus here. Right now, whenever I change my interval, let's talk about this. We can do it with one of our tools here. Let's go to our annotation tool. I'm going to use the second one here. So between each of these, we've gone 5 millimeters. So interval jump 5 millimeters each time we change our slice here. That's going to correlate to the thickness of the slice over here. That's supposed to be a straight line, but we'll see our thickness over here. So to answer your question, if I change this to 5 millimeter, I have my thickness really thin, we are skipping over some anatomy. So if I change my thickness to 5 millimeters, what Paul talked about is seeing the thickness of the slice. So right now we're seeing 2.5 millimeters mesial and 2.5 millimeters distal to make up a total of 5 millimeters right there. So whenever I do go from here to here, we're still going to see there's your 5 millimeter slice. So you would see that all the way around the arch. So what I would say is, if I come in here and I do my interval at 1 millimeter, do I need this at 5 millimeters to see all that anatomy through there? Or can I change this down to my either 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter to see all the anatomy each time I scroll through there? And I hope, Dr. Barker, I hope that I did articulate that to you proper. If not, shoot us an email at Vatech Education or education@vatechamerica.com, and we can go ahead and answer that offline there.
Okay. Great.
Anything else for today's session, Paul?
Somebody asked a question earlier. I just thought that'd be good. Somebody asked if you could pop up that slide that has our email on it.
Yes, let me do that.
Be a good idea.
Right. So this should be at the vatechamerica.com right here. So
There you go.
sales@vatechamerica.com, or if you want to talk to us individually or the education team, Vatech at education at vatechamerica.com. Also, if you would check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, always doing advertising. Really appreciate the feedback we get there. You might also get a survey after that. I really appreciate it if you would fill out that survey. We sent one out the first week. We got about 18 responses, so it can really help us if you could fill out the survey afterwards for our session here, because we can give you some topics. And I want to end down here with some questions that get a lot of questions that are asked. So number one, how do I get a recording? You'll get an email later today in about 2 hours that has a link for the recording. Also has a link for next week's session. Right now we're up over 300 people signed up for next week, so really appreciate if you could sign up also if you already haven't. Next week, our question and answer at the top of the hour, we're going to start with selecting a field of view, large or small. What am I seeing, or what, kind of a topic of what are we seeing in different fields of view. Just a brief overview, kind of leading up to our radiology, or not radiology, to our anatomy view coming up on the 29th. So thanks again, everybody, for your time. We really appreciate all our family, Vatech family. Everybody stay safe until next week, and we will meet again very soon. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.